What's up? What's up? I'm Dr. Omatma, host of Egg Meets Sperm, where we're busting fertility myths, sharing tangible tips for your fertility journey, and bringing you the most knowledgeable guests to support your journey to parenthood. This podcast is for both women and men because getting fertile as fuck is for both partners, don't you think? Remember, just listening to this podcast won't get you pregnant, but following the tips we share just may. Let's get you fertile AF so that you can co-create the family you dream of. And if your partner's not listening to this, make sure to share this episode with your partner. Hello and welcome to Egg Meets Sperm. My guest today is someone that you all probably know and completely adore as much as I do, Dr. Carrie Jones. She is a naturopathic doctor, a FABNE, which is a fancy way of saying a naturopathic endocrinology expert, and an MPH, which is Master's in Public Health. She's also an internationally recognized speaker, consultant, and educator on the topic of women's health and hormones for over 20 years. Dr. Jones was one of the first to become board certified through the American Association of Naturopathic Endocrinology and currently serves on the board. She was the medical director of Dutch Test for several years and is a clinical expert for the Life Matrix Resource Center's stress program in Under Armour. Currently, she's the head of medical education at Rupa Health and is the host of the Root Cause Medicine podcast. Thank you so much for being with me today, Dr. Jones. You are always an honor to speak to you, honestly, but I didn't know this about Under Armour. What is this thing about? Like, what do you do with them?
Isn't that funny? So Under Armour has locations throughout the world, and here in Portland, Oregon, where I live, is their human performance center. And so a fellow naturopathic friend of mine, was involved on the men's side. He was a D1 athlete in nutrition and what have you, and they were saying, we really want a female equivalent to help with our female athletes that we sponsor at like track and field level, our runners, to talk to them about hormones, their menstrual cycle, training, etc. Wow. So I got brought in last year in 2022, I think, and I've done a couple of really cool things with them for all ages. I did for like middle school and high school track runners and coaches, and then all the way up to some of their sponsored athletes. Last fall, they flew me out to New York and got to talk about training in the menstrual cycle, which was so much fun. And I love that. And I hope that all the sports companies are now recognizing, like we're a little bit different when we have our our period, we have menstrual cycle. We're a little bit different in how we train and how we recover. And you don't have to be an athlete to recognize this. It could be somebody who just exercises regularly. It doesn't, feel like they're a quote athlete, but that's what I've been doing for them.
Yeah. Awesome. It's so needed because, like, honestly, between research and athleticism and just general health and wellness, it's like we do all the research on the guys and then we hope it applies to women. Yeah. Yeah, that's not how the body works, actually.
Not a human cycle. That's for sure. That's for sure.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm really excited to talk today about all things mitochondria, which are at the root of fertility and how well we are going to be able to produce eggs, I should say, produce sperm, and are they going to be any good quality to actually produce humans? So let's get into it. Let's start with the basic. What is in your, you're always like so good at explaining everything. So what is happening with steroid hormones and the mitochondria? Like, how does that connection actually work?
Well, we all learned in school, hopefully, it's the one thing we all took out of school when we were in middle school or high school, is that our mitochondria are our cellular powerhouses. They are responsible for our ATP or energy, but they also play a role in how we make hormones. So believe it or not, when you need to make an estrogen like estradiol or progesterone or testosterone, even cortisol, you actually, the very first step happens in your mitochondria. So if you are trying to make progesterone after ovulation, you have to have healthy mitochondria, because the very first step happens in the mitochondria. Now, then it leaves and it goes next door to another little organelle called the endoplasmic reticulum. But the health of your mitochondria is so important right then and there. If you don't have healthy mitochondria, then you may be somebody who struggles to make progesterone, not because of ovulation issues or brain issues, but maybe down there at that really tiny microscopic cellular level. Same for cortisol, same for testosterone. If your mitochondria don't have a lot of oomph or a lot of health, then you're going to struggle.
So yes, if the mitochondria are not functioning well, then we won't have good hormones.
And they're dramatic, our mitochondria. They're like glass houses. I mean, they react and crack and break to the slightest thing, which is what makes it hard on the one hand, because they are so sensitive to things like chemicals, and they are sensitive to things like stress, and they are sensitive to things like lack of nutrients, that we're getting in our body. But the good thing is they also have in this inborn repair system, or this inborn, they have options of ways to repair themselves, that things we do or eat or drink or our lifestyle choices can help to repair them. So I know sometimes people hear about the mitochondria and they know their hormones aren't doing that well, and they think, oh, I'm doomed. Like, I've broken mitochondria. That's like the worst. Like, no, not doomed. Yes, they are dramatic. Yes, they crack very easily like a glass house, but thankfully you can be very proactive about them.
Right. And so what I hear you saying is, like, they're just as sensitive as they are to the negative, they're also extremely sensitive to the positive.
Yes, I love that. Yes.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So is there a way to test this, by the way? Can we know what our mitochondrial function looks like, or if they're like the glass houses that are broken or in a good state?
So not directly, nothing that like they'll do in science, in research, they'll do, like biopsies, and then they can look at the health of the mitochondria. What we tend to do in medicine is we look at sort of the markers responsible in and around the mitochondria to see how they're doing. So for example, hormones, if you know that your progesterone's low, if your cortisol is struggling, if your testosterone's low, things are kind of low, I'm like, ooh, there's a few options, but struggling mitochondria is one of them. We know that it requires certain nutrients to make your mitochondria do their job. So if you're low in vitamin B12, as an example, if you're low in CoQ10, as an example, it's going to be really hard for your mitochondria to do their job. There's what we call some organic acids. There's an organic acid test, and some of the markers relate to mitochondria. So there's not one easy, like, draw your blood, check your mitochondria. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. And the one of the hard things about mitochondria and testing is that we have them, all over our body, from our heads to our toes. And you may have unhealthy mitochondria in one area and perfectly fine mitochondria in the other. So you may be struggling in the ovaries testicles for whatever reason, and everywhere else is doing just fine. And so that's why sometimes with testing, we have to take your symptoms into account, medications you're on, exposures you've had, plus this lab work. It's definitely more than just, I read a blog post, I think I have mitochondrial issues. It is deeper than that. Yeah.
And I find that from what you just said, like the CoQ10, B12, whole bunch of like vitamins, minerals, antioxidants that, like, we know have a positive impact on mitochondrial function. I'm curious what you think about supplementing antioxidants or even like vitamins in people that have decent levels of those things already. Does that have any like growing impact on
talk
mitochondria?
About controversial? Oh my gosh. the vitamin part, if you are vitamin deficient, if you are B12 deficient, let's say, or if you are selenium deficient, I do think either taking those nutrients, taking those vitamins in, also figuring out why are you B12 deficient? Do you not eat those foods? Are you not absorbing those foods? Do you have some sort of gut issue? So figure that out. So I'm a fan of that. Now, as far as taking antioxidants, I do love antioxidants, but I have had some PhDs explain to me, they're like, your antioxidant system, it's not like if you take, what's a good example? Like you take, what were they saying? Like an N-acetylcysteine or glutathione. There's a lot of research on that. But they're like, the antioxidant system works in the body when it gets provoked. So when the mitochondria get provoked, when stones are thrown at the glass house, that's when your antioxidant system kicks in and goes, oh, no. We have to fix the cracks, plug the holes, block the stones to help the mitochondria get better. So it's not like a system that's necessarily on all the time, which is why I had this PhD explain to me. She's like, if you take glutathione in the morning, but that's not when you need it, that's not when your system is provoked, then now you hear about research suggesting taking it multiple, like smaller doses throughout the day, like vitamin C, smaller doses throughout the day. Other people feel the opposite. Other people are like, just get in your system, and let your body do with it what may. And so I've definitely seen in practice, and I'm sure you have too, positive outcomes in both areas. You support with antioxidants, whether it is glutathione or green tea or, vitamin C, et cetera. And people actually do respond really well. But it is an interesting concept to me that our system isn't humming along 24/7, 365. It responds when it gets provoked. And so we may have taken a supplement at the wrong time, not knowing it, but maybe tomorrow you take it and we did need it. So it may balance out in the end. So I'm pro, I like antioxidants. I take them, especially the last couple of years for sure, when I travel or my stress is higher. But it is interesting. The concept around how do they work is changing for me.
I also think, like, I see it a lot in the fertility world, especially. It's like, we're not even at the point to talk about when to take these things. It's still at the surface level of like, here's all of the antioxidants that help with fertility. Just take them all. Yeah. And I'm like, that's silly. Right? Like,
inexpensive.
and extremely expensive, right? If you're taking 600 milligrams of ubiquinol, the active form of CoQ10, that's a pretty nice chunk of money to put into your fertility every month, let alone then you add to it glutathione, NAC, acetyl L-carnitine. Like we could list all of the things. And I feel like there is like some aspect of diminishing return on investment when we flood our systems with things that we already have enough of. Yeah.
Right. And especially because we don't know if you read or hear your sister took 600 milligrams of ubiquinol, but that's maybe isn't what you need. And that's where, and then, then somebody will comment like, oh my gosh, it's so expensive and I'm not pregnant yet, and I have so much empathy for them because I'm like, it is so expensive. Are you sure that's what you need? Are you sure? Maybe you should go see Dr. Mama.
Thank you. But yes, it's really like, I feel like the fertility world is so wrapped up in this like idea of antioxidants, and unfortunately like a lot of them are super expensive, but then we forget about the basics, right? Like the number of times I've tested people and they have plenty of CoQ10 but like extremely deficient in vitamin C, and vitamin C is like way more core to anything that is functioning in your body than CoQ10 is.
And so we don't, as humans, we don't make our own vitamin C. I mean, I joke about this all the time because there's actual research out there on goats, mountain goats. I don't know who studied this, but stressed out mountain goats. And when mountain goats get stressed out, they make exponential levels of vitamin C. Why? Because it's an antioxidant, and because it's real supportive to your adrenal glands and stress response. Humans are one of the few mammals that don't make their own vitamin C. I think guinea pigs don't, and like one other crazy animal doesn't either. So we have to get it from diet. And if we are stressed, whether from true stress or infection or inflammation or, time change or whatever it is, change of season, we actually are going to need more vitamin C than the average goat because we don't make our own.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it goes to this idea of like really thinking about what it is that we want to supplement with and being strategic about it. And maybe even like sometimes for cost reasons, I've said, well, take it like every other day, and then let's take this other thing every other day.
Yeah.
And you can kind of like optimize people with lower doses more frequently, like you said, of some things, and then kind of spacing out the things that are relatively expensive, but you're going to get different effects from having a little bit of it floating in your system.
And even some of them, you and I talked about this before, better bang for your buck, so to say. So like broccoli seed sprouts, when you chew them or chop them up, they form a molecule called sulforaphane with an S. It's sulforaphane. And what sulforaphane does is it actually turns on a bunch of enzymes. So basically a bunch of factories that pump out antioxidant support. So like the enzyme for glutathione goes up, your detoxification factories, enzymes increase and turn on. And it can last. I was listening to one of the big sulforaphane researchers at Johns Hopkins, and he's like, it can last a couple of days. And so sometimes, broccoli sprouts or sulforaphane is a supplement, can be expensive. And he's like, take it every 2 or 3 days, keep your factory humming, and you get like hundreds of factories that get activated and turned on, or enzymes is what we call them. And I was like, man, that's so great to know that we can be cost effective and still be very helpful in the body.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, I absolutely love talking to you because I always feel like, yes, oh my gosh.
We nerd out.
If I could just geek out with you all day, that would be
I know.
Perfect.
I know.
So I know that we wanted to talk about, and we were talking about before we started recording, a little bit about melatonin. And melatonin is one of these like uber powerful antioxidants. So I will let you take it away. Like, tell us about melatonin.
So I have long said, I think melatonin is your most potent antioxidant. That's a personal opinion. I think it is the most potent antioxidant. And then last year, I had the pleasure of meeting the godfather of melatonin research, Dr. Russ Ryder, who's been studying melatonin since the 1940s. He's in his 80s. He's 86 or 87. And I've read a ton of his papers. And so some people geek out over like Taylor Swift, and I geeked out over Russ Ryder. Like I got a picture with him, the whole thing. Like, that's where I was at. So he was wonderful because he answered a lot of questions around melatonin. People freak out. How much do I take? Is there a feedback loop? I've heard it's bad for you. I've heard, all these various things, or I get weird dreams when I take it. Can I take too much? How much should you take? So the human body makes about, like adults make about 0.3 to 0.8 milligrams. Like that's 0.8 milligrams. And we see it on this shelf all the time, a milligram, 3 milligrams, 5 milligrams.
Right.
So he's like, okay, we make less than a milligram a day. We make it all over the body. Every single cell that has a mitochondria makes melatonin, because all our cells make, believe it or not, all our mitochondria, it's now been proven, can make their own melatonin. Our gut makes a boatload of melatonin because it's such a powerful antioxidant, and everything you breathe or drink or eat or swallow goes right to your gut. So your body's like, cool, I got you. Melatonin is here as an antioxidant to help you. But where we get a lot of our melatonin out in circulation, out in our blood, is from our brain in the pineal gland. And the pineal gland, of course, is responsive to dark. So we make melatonin at night as it gets dark. And we start to pick up speed of melatonin about an hour or two before we go to bed. And then it peaks in the middle of the night and then drops back down. Cortisol is the opposite. Cortisol comes out with the sun. Cortisol raises in the day. Melatonin raises in the night. So we lose this ability, though, for a variety of reasons. Like if we're not sleeping, of course, if we have night lights or lights around us, if we are traveling and we're off time zones, age, unfortunately, infection, illness can sort of ruin or slow or break our ability to make melatonin out of our pineal gland. So we were just talking about antioxidants, and I didn't mention melatonin because I knew we were going to talk about it. But one of the key factors is, okay, we know it's made in all the mitochondria, and we know from the brain, it's darkness and sleep is so important. So, and I obviously, of course, know you talk about this with your fertility patients, but the number of people that I would see and I go, how's your sleep? And they go, oh, it's fine. Well, tell me about it. I wake up several times in the night. I can't fall asleep. I can't stay asleep. My kids get me up, the animals are sleeping in bed. I don't always wake refreshed. I'm like, and that's fine. And they're like, well, it's my normal, And so when you have all that disruption, it's going to affect your melatonin. And because I think melatonin, it has multiple ways it acts as an antioxidant, and how it neutralizes fires in the body or, bad things in the body. It can morph and change into other molecules to like become its own little army and help. And so if we're not sleeping, like first and foremost, the basics before you run out and buy 600 milligrams ubiquinol.
Yes, for real.
Sleeping.
Yes, absolutely. Like the number of times I've had this conversation with people, they come in and our first step is like, let's optimize cortisol melatonin rhythm in the body, right? And people are like, but when are we going to get to the hormones?
Yeah.
I'm like, what hormones? Like there will be no hormones until you get this right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and they are hormones, right?
Yes.
Melatonin.
Yes. They're both
They're just
hormones.
different than what everybody thinks.
Yeah.
And so
they're like, everyone's into the estrogen, progesterone.
Yeah, of course.
How to get rid of estrogen? How do I make more progesterone?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, let's start with the foundation and you got to lay the bricks.
Well, and as you always talk about, and I always talk about, our menstrual cycle is quite literally a rhythm over roughly 28 days. How is that rhythm kicked off? Well, it's kicked off from our sleep wake rhythm. So I always tell people, if you don't have a good sleeping rhythm and then a good waking rhythm, then you're not going to have none of the rest of your rhythms are going to be good. Your menstrual rhythm, your ovulation rhythm, your hunger rhythm, when you're hungry, when you're not hungry, none of that's going to be on. It's going to be completely screwed up. So we have to get the most basic rhythm there is. It's what we call the circadian rhythm. It's the master rhythm in the body to help all the rest of your rhythms. So I know you talk about this, but I'm like, hit home again. Everyone listening.
Absolutely. Sometimes people need to hear it from Dr. Carrie Jones.
Multiple people. And it's not fun and it's not sexy. And people are like, that's great. Can I just take progesterone? And while it's true, progesterone might help you sleep. It's not going to help the multiple, if you're constantly interrupted, if your partner snores, if you're snoring, if you've got night lights, if you're not sleeping in complete darkness, you've got your phone right next to your head on your bedstand and it's going off through the night, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Like you really do have to pay attention to your sleep environment. What do you do before you go to bed? Are you watching TV? Are you on your phone? Are you on your computer, your iPad? Are you all wound up and then you try to get into bed? All of that plays a role.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you're talking about it, even though it's not sexy, because there is like something so fundamental to human existence. I don't care if you're trying to have a baby or trying to heal or trying to get over Lyme, like whatever it is, if you don't have this figured out, there's nothing.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
That is the truth.
So I'm curious, we talked a little bit about the sleep-wake cycle. Melatonin, primarily what's floating around in our system, is produced in the brain, in the pineal gland.
What Dr. Ryder says. Now you will see all over social media where people are like, oh, your gut, your intestinal cells make 400 times the amount of melatonin than your brain does, your pineal gland. Which is true. According to Dr. Ryder, the majority of that stays in the gut. It's what we call a paracrine hormone. So it's like, it goes next door. It's like stays local to help local. It doesn't really go out in circulation, whereas
Mm.
the brain makes it, gets rid of it, dumps it out in circulation.
So, and I'm like asking this purely out of my own brain. I wish I had like looked into this before I got on the call with you. But is the paracrine function, so the melatonin produced in the gut, what is it doing for the gut?
It's supporting, my understanding is it's supporting the mitochondria, because remember, everything you eat or breathe or drink or swallow goes right down into your stomach and then your intestines, large or small and large intestine. And so to have your, the mitochondria are fragile. And so to help you actually, as melatonin can be an antioxidant on its own, and then to support within the mitochondria of those cells. So it has this sort of multiphasic action. So like, let's say you ate a food that maybe you shouldn't, or you ate a food that had a bacteria on it, and now you swallow it and it goes down there. And now you've got some infection, some inflammation. Like, believe it or not, melatonin, besides your immune system, your melatonin is also there to help support and back up, because the gut's a major barrier. And so it's there to try to help support the barrier on its own as an antioxidant, but also down in the mitochondria.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Just like in the ovaries, the production of hormones creates a lot of what we call free radicals, basically like little miniature fires. And so then our body has its own little mini fire response system, right? We have fire trucks and fire men and women that like drive in and like help put out the fires. So these natural making hormones, which we want, it's natural. It's just what the body was designed. In the process, we create little mini fires. And so especially in the ovaries, because we make so many hormones out of the ovaries, a lot of androgens and estrogens and progesterone. And so we make more fires there than in other places. And so the body said, all right, you know what? I am going to make melatonin in the mitochondria. We already have some antioxidants in the mitochondria, glutathione, superoxide dismutase, catalase. These are just names of antioxidants that help. Mitochondria is there as well to quench those fires, so that we don't essentially burn out our mitochondria and ruin our hormones.
Nice. So the melatonin that's in the mitochondria in the ovaries, are there things that disrupt the production of local melatonin in the mitochondria as opposed to the pineal melatonin?
So the pineal, of course, is very light dark affected, but the ovarian can be light dark affected because the whole body works as a system, right? If you're going to screw it up in the brain, you might also screw it up in the ovaries as well. But what I have found, what I've seen is honestly, like, I wouldn't say I know like a pinpoint, like this absolutely affects the ovaries. I mean, I know chemicals, right? Endocrine disrupting chemicals absolutely affect ovaries and testicles for that matter. But one of the big things that I've gotten into is like our lymphatic movement, scar adhesions, endometriosis adhesions. So anything that's going to restrict or reduce or compress lymph movement, blood movement, nerve innervation to and around the ovaries and the uterus will also affect your mitochondria, because, you have a lot of blood, as we know, and a lot of like lymph and vein that goes around your ovaries because you have to bring nutrients and hormones there.
Yeah,
so if you
absolutely.
happen to have, like if you should probably go see a chiropractor or get, abdominal massage or acupuncture or PT or scar therapy, if maybe you've had, C-sections or some sort of surgery. I have found just anecdotally, like that stuff has been really helpful at lymph clearing away the bad, and then all that fresh blood bringing in the new, and that can be really helpful.
Nice. So basically like supporting the local blood flow to the ovaries can help reduce the congestion or lymph buildup and increase the fresh blood that's going to support melatonin production, as well as probably all other antioxidants.
Definitely. Yeah. I was talking to I don't know if Dr. Perry Nicholson, he stopped chasing pain on Instagram, and he's the lymphatic doctor. And so he calls it the big six. So everyone wants to like dry skin brush or do lymphatic stuff. And he's like, well, you have to open up your big six lymphatic like nests or like, like conglomerations of lymph nodes. And so it's, at the collarbone, it's sort of behind the ear, behind the jaw, in the armpits, and then upper belly, but then lower belly. So he's like, as you move around the upper belly, trying to get that, but the lower belly, when he describes it, he's like, oh, it's your groin. I'm like, oh, like right where your ovaries are, like right there.
Yeah.
And then the last place is behind the knees, believe it or not. And so he often talks about if you go get lymphatic massage, or people go, oh, I love lymphatic work, or I have a rebounder, or I dry skin brush. He's like, oh gosh, you have to first start with stimulating those 6 areas, but definitely the ovarian area, because we have so many lymph nodes, right? We have so many lymph nodes in our abdomen. And then you said the word congestion. We're just trying to bring out with the old, in with the new.
Okay, cool. I love this. Love it. Okay, so melatonin, really incredible nourisher or reviver of mitochondrial function. Is there, this is what I wanted to ask you. So in terms of testing, and I think you said this a little earlier, like what we are testing, urine, blood, etc., for melatonin is basically a reflection of what the pineal gland is pumping out.
That's what Dr. Ryder says. Yeah. Now, obviously, some from the body, he says, is going to go into circulation, but the predominant circulation, he says, is from the pineal gland. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know that people can have low melatonin, and that's obvious, but let's talk a little bit about the extreme of high melatonin. And I saw this recently on a Dutch test. Her level was 524 on melatonin. And I kind of freaked out because I was like, she's not taking any melatonin. So where and why and what do we do about it?
So I will say some people don't think they're taking, just having worked at Dutch for as many years as I did, some people don't think they're taking melatonin because the actual bottle doesn't say melatonin. But when they turn over and read a lot of their bottles, here's a classic example. There's a detox supplement called TUDCA, TUDCA. It's a gallbladder support, right?
Yeah, totally.
And so it got super popular the last couple of years. The company, blew up. Second ingredient's melatonin. And I
like, think it's like 3 milligrams.
It's like 3 milligrams.
Not a, like, tiny
so all these people are like, no. All I take is a gallbladder support. I'm like, with 3 milligrams of melatonin in it. So if it's not on the front label, people forget to look on the back label. The other thing we constantly saw was like sleepy time teas, or relaxing teas, calming teas. And then of course they would add melatonin to it, and they would take that before bed. But because it didn't say melatonin tea, they were like, no, I just take sleepy time, or calming, or whatever, it's passion flower tea with melatonin. And so I do just suggest to people, I believe you when you don't think you're taking melatonin, but isn't worked hidden for the company, just turn things over. Is there melatonin in your magnesium? Is there melatonin in your anti-anxiety supplement? Now, if it's not, let's say you're like, absolutely not. Melatonin can go up in times of stress. It can go up in times of big time gut inflammation, because remember, even though a lot of it comes from the pineal gland, celiac, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, food poisoning, we did definitely see that melatonin go up because the gut was now making tons of it. And some of it, of course, would go into circulation. So GI issues, sort of acute GI issues, would do it. We would see melatonin go up foods. So pistachios, tart cherry juice. There was a third one, it has like milligrams of melatonin in it. And so some people, they like to snack on pistachios, that was their thing, or they were taking cherry juice as part of some cleanse or part of some, whatever, urinary tract infection avoiding thing. And so that could be another reason. There are some medications known to increase melatonin, and it's a list that's now escaping me, but it's we can search we can look it up, but there are some medications that are known to raise melatonin. And so if a patient has any of those things, or a combination of factors, then they may have elevated melatonin. When you take melatonin, the supplement, I will tell you, when you swallow melatonin, then it breaks apart into what we call melatonin metabolites. Most of the body gets rid of them. The body's mostly like, too much, let's get rid of you. And you will urinate it out. And so if you were taking melatonin, and any urine test that you do for melatonin, it will be really high, thousands, and people freak out. Oh my gosh, the cutoff is 60 and it's, I'm 6,000. It doesn't necessarily mean you're on too much. It just means that your liver is getting rid of it to your kidneys, and then out it goes. So all the testing out there, whatever form you choose, it's a baseline only. There's not a great monitoring test of, quote, am I on enough, or am I taking too much? So it's baseline only.
Yeah. And at that point, like if you're supplementing, you're basing it on symptoms. Like, is it helping you sleep better, wake up feeling more rested, etc.?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you fall asleep? Do you stay asleep? How are you doing? Yeah, exactly. And there's no feedback loop. This is the number one question. I will also see this all over social media, where actually a lot of doctors have a misunderstanding of melatonin, and they're like, oh, I don't like it because there's what I mean by feedback loop is that if you take the pill melatonin, you will suppress your own melatonin production, and that there is no feedback loop for melatonin, according to Dr. Ryder. He's like, that's not at all how it works. So if you take melatonin, it's not going to suppress your own melatonin. Now, you can genetically have an issue making melatonin. I have had a few patients through the years. Melatonin comes from serotonin. And it's a two-step process. And so one, if you don't make enough serotonin, you might not make enough melatonin. Or two, genetically, you may not be able to get through that two-step process to melatonin. And then you might actually need melatonin for life. You just can't actually make it that well, especially out of the pineal gland. But there is no feedback loop on what dose you choose to take, or you're told to take.
Okay. Just to clarify, so if we're testing, let's say someone's going in for a Dutch test or is going to do a urinary test, should they pause melatonin supplementation, and for how long?
That's a good question. And okay, so you have options. Here's what are you looking for? So here's why I ask. If you want to know what your baseline melatonin is, let's pretend you just started taking melatonin, and now they've come to see you. They're going to do some sort of urine test, and you're like, hey, I want to see your baseline melatonin. So stop your melatonin. We recommend stopping for like a good week, like a good 4 to 7 days. Some people will stop like 2 nights before, but we find that melatonin tends to linger, especially because people tend to take higher doses than they need. And so so in that case, I say stop. Now, on the flip side, let's say they've been seeing you and they can't sleep. They can't sleep at all. Melatonin is their savior on sleep. And if they stop their melatonin, they know they're not going to sleep, which is going to screw up their cortisol. So now the question is, what's more important? Do you want to see them sleeping and what their cortisol is? Or do you want to see them off melatonin so you get a baseline melatonin with a screwed up cortisol? So as a practitioner, what do you want to see, right? And so there's no right answer. It's what question do you want to answer? So we would have doctors who would go, well, I put them on melatonin to get them to improve their cortisol so they would sleep, and then their cortisol in the day look better. I'm looking to make sure that's happening. So I'm like, okay, then stay on melatonin. Let's see if the cortisol is better. And other people were like, oh my gosh, they just put themselves on melatonin. I want to see them completely baseline, nothing, no medications, no supplements, no nothing in their system. Cool. Have them stop it for about 5 days, and then collect the test.
Okay. Fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
So cool. I'm still a little perplexed about this woman, because I'm pretty sure I will triple make sure that all of her supplements don't have melatonin. But she also doesn't seem to have any gut like acute gut thing. So yeah, I'm
I can
curious to
actually get
see.
you, I have it in my notes on my computer here.
Yeah.
When we're done, I'll email you the list of things that are known to
Mm.
raise melatonin
Mm-hmm.
somewhat,
Mm-hmm.
beyond supplementation.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And then what do you think about the herbal melatonin support? Have you seen that?
Like, the herbatonin.
Hmm. Yeah, I was
Yes.
trying
I
to.
actually have that downstairs, believe it or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
They've done that company in particular. I have no affiliation with them. They
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
pay any of my bills. But I've known them for a while. They've
Mm.
done they originally are who taught me about melatonin and like
Hmm.
physiologic doses and what have you, and pointed to me to some of Dr. Ryder's papers years ago, which is what got me into it. And so, and I also learned like why melatonin, you couldn't get low levels of melatonin for a long time because there's a patent on it. And so
Mm.
companies couldn't make below 1 milligram,
Hmm.
is my understanding. And so I believe the patent expired and now companies can make below one
Microdoses.
milligram. Yeah,
Yeah.
microdoses, or what we call physiologic doses.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
so I've used it. Like I said, I happen to have it
Yeah.
downstairs.
Yeah.
I personally don't, it's a hard one for me to judge because I personally don't need melatonin. Every time I test my melatonin on whatever test
Yeah.
I test, my pineal gland, thank you, pineal gland, is doing great. I will use melatonin when I change big time zones, like if I go to Europe or Australia or something like that, to try to help phase shift is what we call it.
Hmm.
Um, but I had my husband trying melatonin for sleep purposes, and it
Hmm.
seems to be helping.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
In terms of phase shifting, what do you like to do with it? And you like travel so much, so I'm sure you've got it down.
So you take melatonin, so whatever city you're in, whatever time zone you're in, you take melatonin about an hour or two before bed in that place. That's what I do. I believe there is another method out there where you take it earlier in the day. Oh man, I think Dr. Ryder has an alternative that he gave us that I have written down somewhere. Like you take it at lunch and then you take it again an hour or two before bed to help your body phase shift.
Once you're landed in the new
Once
time
you're
zone.
correct. I never remember to take it earlier than that. I usually get to the hotel and it's after dinner and then I'm like, oh crap, I take melatonin. So then I would take my melatonin, but you do want to take it for phase shifting. It is better to take it an hour or two before you go to bed versus getting into bed to sleep and then like, oh, I need to take melatonin. Because
Right. Yeah.
you need to get that spike of melatonin and you'll miss it when you get into bed. And you can only phase shift so much, taking melatonin isn't going to shift you 6 hours in a night. And what we mean for people, and I'm sure everyone obviously knows jet lag and time zone changes and whatnot, but like your brain thinks you're back at home, but your feet are on a different time zone. And so we're just trying to get the geolocation where your feet are to where your brain thinks you are back at home to match up. And so, that's why it can take, especially if you go west to east. So if you go to Europe, it's harder for a lot of people versus going the other way because of our circadian rhythm is a little bit longer than 24 hours. The human circadian rhythm is a little longer than 24 hours. So going to Europe back to the US, so east to west, it's faster for us versus going the other way. Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
Crazy, right?
Super crazy.
I know. Crazy circadian rhythm. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, this was such a great conversation. I'm so glad to always be able to connect with you. You are a wealth of information. For those of you that are not following Dr. Carrie Jones, you really should. I don't care if you're a practitioner or someone who is struggling with fertility or on your journey to healing and health. There's just nobody who should not be following you. So we will link that in the show notes. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the people that are listening?
I wanted to just say thank you so much. I obviously adore you and think the world of you. And I've learned so much from you. So it's a real honor to be on and talking with your people.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. All right. And for the rest of you listening in, make sure to follow up all week. You're going to have amazing tips from Dr. Carrie Jones, and they will be awesome. So we will see you soon. Thank you for listening in. Was that an amazing episode or what? Make sure to check our show notes so that you can link up with our guests. And if you're not a part of our secret Fertile AF community, you can join for free via the link in our show notes. Last but not least, have you showed us some love lately? It would mean the world to us if you could share and review our podcast. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time on Egg Meets Sperm. Peace.